Welcome to Face with Stigma's Breaking Down Barriers presentation.
Have you ever seen stigma firsthand and wanted to do something about it, but you just didn't know how to handle the situation?
We have seen this in our community, and we have created a compassionate solution to this issue.
Our response to this was to create a workshop and deliver it to those that work with the vulnerable community.
About 3 years ago, while volunteering at Rock Bay Landing's shelter, I saw a need to address the stigma and discrimination that was associated with those living in the vulnerable community. Being someone who had once lived in this community, I wanted to make a change in the way people were seen and treated. I wanted to humanize people experiencing homelessness, substance use, and mental health disorders. At the time, I was a peer support worker at Rock Bay Landing's Overdose Prevention Unit, or OPU, where I responded to overdoses, supported my peers, and was a silent witness for clients of the OPU. As a silent witness, I was reminded of my own experiences with stigma when I supported people to hospitals, doctor's appointments, and other appointments. I saw rampant stigma and discrimination happening right in front of my eyes, such as people not being heard or cared about, people getting less than full care, being treated like drug seekers and cons, but mostly being treated less than human because of their incidental identifiers, and I knew things needed to change. I saw a chance to make a difference when I was offered the position of the person with lived experience at the CAT, the Community Action Team, a group of people working to end the opioid crisis. It was very intimidating being the only person with lived experience representing an important community and helping to end the crisis, but I was honored to be a part of the work. While I was a member of the CAT, a pot of money became available to fight the stigma associated with the opioid crisis. That's when my vision came to life. I had the idea to have an event where people tell their personal stories to humanize and put a face to those who were struggling with opioids and bring people out of the shadows and fringe of society due to stigma. I wanted to create a team of people with lived and living experience of substance use. I wanted this project to be developed and delivered by people with lived and living experience only, as those were the voices that need to be heard. With the support of the Greater Victoria Coalition to End Homelessness, or GVCEH, I put in a proposal and received the funding. With this money, I created a one-time day-long event called Face to Face with Stigma. I had never done this type of project before and had to push out of my comfort zone to bring my idea to life. The first iteration of Face to Face with Stigma happened in July of 2019. In this event, we had 6 storytellers speaking to their own journey and personal experience with stigma. I invited a local Indigenous elder to follow cultural protocols and to be culturally inclusive from the start of this project. Naloxone training, a demo of the drug checking equipment, as well as an open discussion. A very important part of the workshop was engaging with the audience to create the community connection I was striving for. The event was a success. We had a great turnout of 60 community members. At the end of the event, we put out evaluations and received such positive feedback and calls to actions, many of them being that we needed to deliver this workshop to all those working with the vulnerable community. Because of the success, the GVCEH decided to take on Face to Face with Stigma as a core project and fund the development and delivery of our workshop 4 months after the initial iteration. I was thrilled and began to bring my long-term vision of Face to Face to life. The first step was to engage the vulnerable community with a survey to learn what people wanted the participants of the workshops to know about the community. This is when I was able to find people interested in telling their personal stories for Face to Face with Stigma. In November of 2019, I began to pull together a team with lived expertise, and the 10 of us became the Face to Face team. We started storyteller training in December of that year, and we were ready to change people's hearts and minds. We started to book workshops immediately, with the first workshop being for Victoria Police Department's recruits, and Face-to-Face with Stigma grew from there. Face-to-Face with Stigma is inspired, led, developed, and delivered by people with lived and living experience of homelessness, substance use, and mental health disorders. This was a big part of the dream, 100% peer-driven program. When creating the team, I looked to the GVC-EH's language and engagement protocols and reviewed the document for guidance as it was created by people with lived and living experience of homelessness. In this document, there are many recommendations on how to engage properly with people in the homeless community. With the guidance of the document, I wanted to create a team that was paid equitably for their expertise. We pay Victoria's living wage of $20.50 an hour in stipends. It's like when you hire a consultant, you must pay for their expertise and knowledge. This is no different. In order to be inclusive, we also provide bus tickets and limited taxis to get team members to and from meetings, workshops, and events. When working with people with lived and living experience, you need to take into account times and dates of meetings. Meetings and events should never be on social assistance check day or immediately after, as people generally have errands and such on these days. One must also consider time of day, as the meeting should not fall during meals unless meals are provided, nor should they be scheduled early in the morning. Afternoon is best. Food must always be provided, taking into consideration dietary needs. No one can work or think on an empty stomach, and people are better able to digest the information discussed in the meeting over food. Face-to-face team meetings are held over lunch hour, so we provide a meal with everybody's input as to what we should have. Choice is very important, as people with lived and living experience often have limited choices, or their choices are taken away due to circumstances in their lives, and we practice self-determination. We want the team to be able to rely on themselves and be self-driven in writing their stories and presentations, with support from myself as team coordinator and my support coordinator Melissa, as well as their team members.
One of the most important parts of having a team is providing supports through every step of the process, starting with the trauma-informed storyteller training process, right up to the workshop debrief meetings and one-on-one support. With Face-to-Face, we make supporting our team and each other a priority. Everyone is being vulnerable, writing and sharing their stories, and they must feel connected to a team for support. Some of the work is triggering, and we encourage the team to daily check in at any time. We spend a good amount of time doing one-on-one supports for emotional connection and just to check in and see where everyone is at. For the one-on-ones, team members have the choice to sit down with one of us or both of us in a location of their choosing. We always support their needs practically and emotionally when we connect. As Kay mentioned, choice is very important when engaging with this community. Meeting people where they're at is a basic necessity. Meeting in the community is usually preferred than meeting in the office or regular meeting space to change the energy of the meeting and foster a community inclusion. Cultural supports are essential. Our team members participate in smudging and other cultural supports. All of us find benefit in cleansing through these ceremonies. The program actually has a smudge kit available anytime. We have Indigenous team members with the knowledge to practice the cultural protocols. We respectfully honor and recognize the local nation's traditional territories whose land we work on every meeting and every workshop. Fostering team spirit goes hand in hand with providing support as the team connects and gets stronger. It's amazing to see how much the team members support each other. To help strengthen team unity, we participate in outdoor meetings, team building activities, and holiday gatherings. Another part of our support network team is the connection gained during the check-ins before and the checkouts after each meeting. Everybody on our team brings a unique and valuable perspective to the table, These workshops give a chance for these voices to be heard.
When it came time to choose a team, I was still working at the OPU and was able to find potential team members directly from the shelter. Those with living experience that is so valuable and can sometimes be overlooked. I also connected with other organizations such as AVI and Solid, two organizations that employ and engage with people with lived and living experience to get recommendations, as recruiting was all done word of mouth. I also looked for Indigenous and youth representation, as their voices need to be amplified. I'm proud to say we have 3 members of Indigenous descent as well as 2 youth voices to nicely round out our team. This new iteration of Face-to-Face with Stigma has been a success so far. We have delivered workshops both in person and, since COVID, by Zoom to several organizations, including numerous for Victoria Police Department, classes of University of Victoria and Camosun College students, hospitals, and organizations that work directly with the vulnerable community, totaling around 25 workshops in a span of 2 years.
Face-to-Face is rapidly changing people's hearts and minds towards those who are living in homelessness with substance use and/or mental health issues. At the end of every workshop, we ask the workshop participants to fill out an evaluation to further the development of our program. These are a great way to gather data and build up the team with all the awesome reviews. We read each review at the team workshop debrief meetings, and it pumps up the team and shows us that we are really making a difference. This is what makes us strive to continue to humanize people in our community.
When creating a Face-to-Face with Stigma program in your own cities and communities, please consider the engagement and language protocols in the creation of your team. We have provided the link to the GVCEH's document on our website. We have also provided a link to our healthy language protocols that we teach in our workshops, as well as a link to the Face-to-Face with Stigma website. Face-to-Face with Stigma is actively changing people's hearts and inspiring empathy, connection, and reducing fear towards those in the vulnerable community. Here is a video that expresses the value and need of this program as spoken by past workshop participants.
People aren't taught to be compassionate to those without houses or those who use substances. People are taught, oh, they're addicted to substances, or, oh, it's their choice, or, oh, they could be working. It's all these historical biases that ultimately cause discrimination and stigma.
It's not uncommon in the work that I do that when I'm interviewing or talking with people in community that they too have had experiences with homelessness or dislocation or trauma in the home or in their communities.
Before taking the course or the workshop, I would say there was stigma, and I was part of it. I mean, there was always this, I don't want to put this fear, but a little bit hesitant towards that homeless population that we see in our community. So there was always a bit of a fear base behind it. And I think that's just part of that, is because we do deal with a lot of calls with the homeless population and those living on the streets. And I think just realizing that people have, real issues, and, and unfortunately the decisions made or that trauma that they went through has led them to be on the streets. I found that very, very powerful.
It's not the end of the journey. I know there's more work to do, but I have a broader range of the stories that brought people to experiences, and that helps expand the scope of my own narrow worldview or my own narrow assumptions about the world. Yeah.
Actually seeing what people go through, and people like the everyday life that people with mental health disorders have to face, it's indefinitely made me a better nurse. When I have patients come in the hospital who are unhoused, who are suffering from a mental health disorder, I will stick up for them.
I knew I needed to learn more to get over that stigma, and I think this was a perfect opportunity for that.
I hold so much gratitude for the work that Face-to-Face does. It's such an invaluable resource in our community, and I hope you're able to expand your capacity to reach more people.
I just love helping people that need it the most, and it makes me a better person, and it makes the world a better place. So I really hope more people can be enlightened by this this invaluable workshop. It's so important, and I think it just needs to be everywhere.
Thank you for watching our presentation. We hope you enjoyed it.
And we hope that it inspires you to create a similar program in your own community.
Hello, my name is Lisa Crossman. I am the Peer Housing Support Coordinator with the Greater Victoria Coalition to End Homelessness. I am presenting tonight from the traditional territories of the Lekwungen peoples of Esquimalt and Songhees Nation on Vancouver Island in Victoria, BC. And I am here tonight to present on the work that our program has done over this past year with the Travelodge Hotel and the Resident Advisory Committee. This is a mural that was contributed to the exterior of the hotel site. I'm guessing with permission of the outreach staff, Kool-Aid housing site outreach staff, by a local graffiti street artist and a very well-known artist, actually. And so one of the residents had taken this photo to memorialize some of the things that have happened around the site, just because we are actually in the middle of a move transition for every resident of this housing site. And yeah, it's going to be a thing of the past very quickly. So I wanted to include this in the presentation. So the beginnings of the Travelodge Resident Advisory Committee started off with our team being tasked with working at the Travelodge Hotel the very first day that residents were moving into the hotel. And this was quite a quick move-in process as well, because these people were offered housing here as a result of a pandemic response camp that was formed in March 2020. And by May 11th, 2020, people were needed to be moving into this hotel because we had a public safety order in British Columbia where no one could be living outside. So through the engagement of our peer support team, at that time, some of whom were only volunteers, I had to gather many of the workers together on short notice to come here to work at the Travelodge Hotel. And the beginnings of this committee were heard in the engagement that we did on site, mostly outside at that time because it was a nice warm summertime, doing gardening, water balloon fights, circles, research focus groups, all types of different things with people outside actually of the hotel. We didn't actually have access to the inside of the hotel meeting area until later on in the year. So the inside meeting area space, which you can see in this photo, was taken at our Christmas party that our team had with the peer research team, as they're called, because these peers who are supported through the program are specifically involved in personal research activities of their own choice and development with their peer support worker. But as a group because everyone knew each other. So the new thing that we've been able to do with the Travelodge Hotel is gather peer researchers together as a team. And this team was responsible for supporting our team with the development of the beginnings of the committee after a survey event that went out on creating this large meeting room space that was called the Create Your Space survey event. And out of that survey was determined that 81 out of 101 respondents of questionnaires with residents, and at that time guests, because there was an open guest policy at the time, of people who would be using this space on what they wanted to see start up in this space. And 81 out of 101 indicated a tenant committee of some kind, which we had previously heard just from hanging out in our parking lot, peer support activities. And so this was very much community engagement, and the meaningful and collaborative co-development is what we experienced with the peer research team, because they were able to provide us firsthand with what the residents overall and as committee members would be wanting to see initially to start up, because of course the peer researchers here are residents. So here I have actually created a word art. All of these words in these hands are either references to the structure of our committee or major themes that came up throughout the year. First committee meeting being January 2021 up to current day, although our current activities have been put on hold. Due to high COVID numbers, we have also had our large meeting room space in the last couple of weeks turned into a shelter space that was initially going to be a quarantine response shelter, but is now housing some people who have been displaced from another housing site, fortunately. And also we're in the middle of a massive move out transition. So we continue to be sort of still going, and we may be able to get one more meeting in there, which I really hope, just to wrap everything up. But this is the basic structure of what we are looking at. So Travelodge Resident Advisory Committee meetings were always immediately followed by management monthly meetings. And so it worked in a rolling structure where we would meet with the Resident Advisory Committee, and then later that month, a management meeting would be scheduled with 2 members of the advisory committee meeting residents to attend those management meetings. And I would facilitate those meetings, but I would pull back, just do the generalized facilitation, but I really always wanted it to be a conversation directly between residents and management. So a lot of the things that were discussed in these meetings in terms of themes were things like the move out plan, information sharing, communication, increased in-person supports on site, safety of all types and varieties, job draw, quiet times, fire marshal volunteers, food access and food security, substance use and harm reduction, evictions and eviction processes, and relationships with security staff on site. And also what we always included in the beginning of our committee meetings, and that had been decided through consensus with the management meetings, was to include a component for the committee meeting discussion on what was management doing well that committee members appreciated or liked, and what was it that they should keep doing or increase doing. Because sometimes in these types of meetings, there can be a tendency to always go to the negative. And it wasn't that management needed to be rewarded with hearing all of the good things that they were doing. They just literally really wanted to know what are we doing well, because they didn't always know if they were doing the right things. And so that this helped for them to understand what they could keep doing or focus on more, and what they could just scrap because it wasn't working well for people. So by participation in this committee, and from a survey that was recently conducted with resident advisory committee members, one resident explained that, quote, by going to a management meeting, I was able to meet and talk with management at Travelodge and thaw out a somewhat frosty relationship. So what we actually saw was that by combining the resident advisory committee and management monthly meetings together, having those conversations between residents and management in a more focused discussion, rather than just passing in the hall or when there's an emergency that comes up for them in their housing on site at the last minute. It was a focused, planned discussion of an hour and a half, where management and two resident, or three maximum we had at one point, could just sit there and have a discussion with each other. And that actually helped to form and strengthen relationships. In response to these committee meetings and management meetings, from a management quote of the management survey was conducted around the same time as the resident committee, in reflection of one another. And management said in response to the committee meetings, quote, the knowledge of knowing what our residents are needing, wanting, and like, as well as what they don't like or agree with, is very helpful and helps me with, sorry, turn the page, the decisions and choices that I make in my position. So we saw that it was equally impactful on both sides. An example of something that we saw change was in terms of the recommendation, new staff members need to communicate more to initially connect with residents. That was a direct recommendation from the committee. The management response was, management will work with staff and residents on better connecting with one another. For example, photo and name board for staff members to hand out meals, relationship building, etc. And the change that occurred was that increased staff and resident relationship building, and staff approached meal distribution times in a new way by being there to directly hand meals to residents and to utilize that time to check in with residents as well. In relation to this process of recommendation, response, and change, one resident indicated through a survey, when asked, what are some examples of how your personal needs were identified and met or not met through committee activities? Their response was, I noticed a direct result of the meetings. The staff here at the Travelodge Hotel became more engaged and took the initiative in socializing due to feedback from our committee discussions. Here we have a photo of one of our peer support team members, Tracy, with a peer that she works with at the Travelodge Hotel. This photo was taken in one of our drop-in space times, and as you can see, there's art supplies, a bit of food happening. We would have coffee in that space. We even strung up the Christmas lights very early on because there were quite bright fluorescent lighting in there, so it really helped to have a bit more ambient lighting. In addition to some of the feedback I've already presented from resident committee members in the survey, there's a couple of quotes that I wanted to speak to that really made an impact to me when I read through the responses. And that was from one committee member in relation to working with the committee. We have problems, but still deserve to walk proudly. And another committee member that said, I have a voice and a chance every month, in relation to their experience with working with the committee. So it has been very inspiring to read through these responses and see that even though we felt all along like we know this is working, we feel like we're doing the right thing, it's nice to have this evaluation component to just see how deep of an impact that this had, because these committee members were given the opportunity to respond to this on their own time outside of a meeting. And so this was literally their voice. And in terms of our program, we have many different guiding values, but what I've done here is incorporated the top 5 guiding values that were indicated as impact areas by the Resident Advisory Committee. And these are hope, self-determination, respect, social inclusion, and integrity. And those were the top 5 that people had experienced as participants in the Resident Advisory Committee in relation to either experienced within themselves or that they saw reflected through others in their experience. This photo here is, this is one of our team leads at the Travelodge Hotel. Her name is Lee. And I really love this hoodie that she's wearing called Hope Dealer. And that is very much her, but it just so very much went along with the theme of this presentation. And so I wanted to include that photo of her in tandem with this response from the management through the management survey, where it was indicated by a team leader manager, I really enjoyed sitting with our residents and having that personal time and the opportunity to get to know them more on a one-to-one basis, finding out a bit about their backgrounds, their histories, and their stories. So what I've done is to provide the next steps for any of you who might be wanting to start up a similar activity where you're at. I mean, most of us have heard of resident advisory committees at some point. I actually got the idea for starting this in the way that I did through my experience of attending another advisory committee that was put on with another organization as a guest at one point. What I did was thought, what if we were to actually have residents meeting with management? And so that's where we've had the ability to be able to, at this hotel site, because management is working where people are living. So it made it very easy to be able to build that structure, but this really could work anywhere. So I've broken down the key steps here, and in the way that they've made sense in my reflection of how our year has played out with the work of this committee. And the top one is just being there. Like how I said that peer support was just there at the beginning. We were hearing and listening what people were saying that they wanted. That is the number one important thing, and I really can't stress it enough. It is very challenging to, quote, be there in this pandemic, because we usually associate that with being in person. But if you get creative, there's a lot of different ways to be there for people. And I've seen members of my team do this and put this into action. So it is possible to be there. Even in a pandemic, we don't need to completely shut down. As long as people know that we're there, that's when the trust is built. And through that comes engagement. And that's when meaningful and impactful collaborative relationships begin to form, is when you be there, you're engaged with people, you're getting to know people, you're having conversations, you're listening and learning, you are hearing what it is that people actually want to see started, what would mean the most to them. Anyone can go in with an idea of how to do things, but it actually is a lot easier to listen and hear what people are wanting for themselves and try to put that into action. And that's where consultation comes in. Once you have those relationships built with any community, you can then provide opportunity for consultation in order to gather formal and effective feedback from the people you are supporting and serving. And that will be the beginning point of the direction of where things need to go. And anything can be consulted on, even down to, we even asked questions on the Create Your Space survey about what times of day would you like to see peer support there. We got very minute in the details, but it was very helpful in designing how everything played out. Collaboration and development, of course, it is extremely important and imperative to be working in collaboration, not only with the people that you're supporting to start up these initiatives through peer support approach, but also in collaboration with staff, other staff disciplines and teams who may be connected to what you're working in. And then that collaboration goes on into further development as things go on. Follow through is extremely important. That means that when you meet with people, like how we met with the committee for our committee meetings, we would have notes that were created on poster paper in front of the whole committee together, word for word, things written down. Those would become the notes that would go to the management meeting. Then at the management meeting, we would go through those. We would have notes from management. That note would be taken to the next committee meeting, and so forth and so forth. And everything would be followed up on until we had to bring some things to the table several months in a row, but we would continue with that follow through so that people knew that we weren't giving up. Peer leadership is something that you are going to see begin to develop once that trust and engagement and collaboration and development and the follow through. You are naturally going to see participants of your initiatives through peer support. Even if you're not doing this through peer support, you're going to see people become personally empowered to begin to be leaders, not just within the committee setting, but within their own lives. And I have actually seen people who maybe were feeling a little bit lost at the beginning, but now through their involvement in the committee, and this was actually indicated through the reflection survey of committee members, that people found a sense of belonging in the committee that actually provided a direction for where they wanted to go and develop their futures. So this is the end. I'm finishing up this presentation with an image by a world-renowned street graffiti artist named Banksy. And what I liked about this image is that it says in the right-hand side there is always hope. And no matter what's going on, how challenging that things get, all days aren't going to be perfect. All things are not perfect, but there is always hope. And I truly believe that. And I have seen that in action in the work that we have done, especially through this initiative. So I thank you very much for joining me today to hear about this resident advisory committee with our peer housing support program. And if you would like more information on our program, you can visit our website at this web link. Thank you very much.